I would ask everyone here to have a moment of silence and remember Sharon Gillies, who passed away this past week. She was a longtime volunteer on Special Transit. Please observe a moment of silence in her memory. Please be seated. Okay, I would entertain a motion to reconvene an open session. Moved by Councillor Armstrong, seconded by Councillor Erb. All those in favor? I think that's carried. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. I'd entertain, are there any declarations of pecuniary interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act? Seeing none, we have no petitions, but we do have some delegations. First registered delegation is Kristen, Gillett, and Janelle Shalahi of True North Conference. You can come up. You can identify which person you are whose name I butchered. So this is Kristen, welcome.
Thank you.
You have 5 minutes.
There we go. Ian might be joining me here momentarily. If not, I will just move ahead. So thank you very much for all your support for True North. As a region, this council and this city, all the cities, the BIAs, have been super supportive of this event that Communitech has decided to run, going into year 2. So. What is Communitech? Just for anybody who doesn't know what Communitech is. It's a not-for-profit here in the region, really focused about start growing, succeeding tech companies within the region. So we're a place, we're an ecosystem, and we're all about bringing programs to the tech. Some of the fun, these are Ian's slides, so I will try to talk as much about them. We have a growth of 3,300 startups, 20,000 jobs, and 1.7 billion raised in capital, and that's been since 2010, which is extremely exciting for us. And why did we decide to do True North? It was really about building a brand. We were focused on the global reputation of Waterloo region. We wanted to make sure the eyes of the world were on Waterloo, not just all over Canada, but really on the Waterloo region area. It's a key to attract talent and capital to this region. And it's also about the conversation. It's about intersecting tech and humanities needs to be held in the community. And this is really the place that we have those big conversations. So I'm just going to play a quick video that really describes everything. Videos basically says all of it. So a lot of these people in this room that I see before me have attended True North in the past. Year number 2 is going to be super exciting. So a few of our stats that we wanted to reveal. Trending to have 2,500 attendees plus for this year, which is super exciting. And we're also launching the $1 million Leaders Prize in correlation with the Gillett Foundation and Leaders Fund. So this will be focused on an AI challenge, which will be announced at True North 2019 by David Stein. And then these are some of the people that will be coming, the types of people. It's really eyes on the world on Waterloo region is the focus of True North. And then the conference tracks. Focusing on, last year was really about the overall tech for good piece. No different this year, just kind of focusing a little bit more on that, how does that work in our lives, in the way we work, and in our companies. So Living Digital is really about that data, privacy, quantum, how nanotechnology works, the Me Too movement in the tech era, as well as safety on the digital side. Building Bridges Not Walls is really focused on that clean tech, solution-based tech. This is where Matthew Shandy from the region will be presenting about Smart Cities Waterloo region and our bid there and how we're focusing on the health of our youth. And then Age of Relearning is about the whole future of tech, gig economy, how we're really reskilling our workforce and using AI in a positive way for that and not just displacement. Some of our fun speakers that are coming to the region. One of the big ones is Tim Berners-Lee, who's the inventor of the World Wide Web, obviously talking about how we should actually be creating a web contract, taking it back for good, not so much for all the spam and evil that's out there right now. And then we have the festival, which is really where the region, the cities, the BIAs, tourism have come in, tech companies, community organizations. We have over 50 events that are going to be happening over these 3 days. And so this part is open to anybody within the community as well as the True North attendee. And so we're really hoping that people just come down to this area. Wednesday is really focused on the Uptown Waterloo area range, and then Thursday is the downtown Kitchener focus. And that's it. So thank you very much for your support. We really do appreciate it, and we hope to see everybody there.
Thank you. That's incredibly exciting. Our system is down, so I'm going to hear the delegations. Do you mind sticking around? Does anyone have any questions? Thank you so much. It's very exciting, and thank you for giving the shout out to Smart Cities because we so should have won.
I agree.
Thank you so much. Next registered delegation is Brendan Burke. Brendan, you have 5 minutes. Welcome.
Thank you. Well, ladies and gentlemen, members of the council, I'm here this evening not as an employee but as a private citizen who is concerned about the health and safety with our public transit system. My spouse is an employee as well, and so I have multiple reasons to be involved. I believe it's all our goal to come to work in a safe and protected manner, and at the end of the day, return home to our loved ones. Health and safety is everyone's responsibility and should never be questioned. It's something that affects us all. According to the Occupational Health and Safety Act of Ontario, Section 25, subsection 2H, and I quote, "The employer shall take every precaution reasonable in the circumstances for the protection of the worker." I'm pleased to represent the people you see in the gallery, GRT operators, but as I said tonight, we are concerned citizens and residents. We are here to raise some concerns, like what is an acceptable level of violence or threats in the workplace. Many years ago, tragedy befell our organization. A young girl's backpack became stuck in the rear door while exiting. She chased the bus, slipped under the rear wheels, and died. Inquiries were held, and the most pressing question was not who is responsible, but rather what could we have done to prevent this. Changes were made and safety equipment installed. Sadly, too late for that young girl. Tampa Bay has recently experienced its own tragic transit death. A transit driver was murdered by a passenger. I imagine they're having a similar conversation now. What could we have done to prevent this? As operators, we are frequently the target of racial and sexist slurs. We are spat upon, threatened, touched inappropriately, screamed and cursed at. In the last 6 months alone, there has been 1 sexual assault, 6 physical assaults, 10 threats, and 2 incidents of verbal abuse that have occurred on transit vehicles. Many incidents go unreported out of a fear of a paper trail or discipline record that could be used against the operator. Those who do report such abuse are sometimes persuaded to continue their shift as if nothing upsetting has happened. Operators also know that mobile security and supervisor response times are woefully inadequate. How can someone be expected to operate a 20-ton vehicle safely in public under such conditions? How can the public feel safe on transit if the operators have no confidence in their own security? We believe this so strongly that 2 years ago, during collective bargaining, we sought an internal barrier pilot. We did so, even as some operators noted correctly, that issues of safety should not be part of collective bargaining. We sacrificed other benefits to secure this pilot. It was disappointing to realize that after the pilot was finished, that we would not be implementing the barriers. Once again, safety and protection of our drivers is of utmost importance. Imagine applying the same standard to seatbelts, helmets, or any other form of personal protective equipment. With the introduction of the ION, safety of the public transit system will reflect well or poorly on the region as a whole. The region has always been a pioneer, such as adding roundabouts. Why not be a pioneer again and building the safest, most efficient transit system around, one we can all be proud of? Another pressing issue is how the region is dealing with banned individuals in the public transit system. Banned individuals frequently test the system. Operators are constantly trying to keep up with the locations of these individuals because it is a legitimate safety issue both to them and the public. Bylaw 13-050, a bylaw respecting the conduct of persons entering upon buildings, grounds, and public transportation vehicles owned or occupied by the Regional Municipality of Waterloo, has not once been used. Each interaction risks a violent confrontation, and support will often arrive too late. After a few attempts, the banned individual finds someone unwilling to take that risk. The public and operators wonder why this continues with great frequency. We requested council instruct GRT administration to install barriers as bargained for in 2017. We request that council exercise oversight to ensure that security response times to incidents on the bus are within acceptable parameters and that no operator need fear retaliation for reporting a security incident. And we request the council ask GRT administration if the notion that violence and abuse are simply part of public transit represents official policy. I would like to take this opportunity to thank council for giving me the chance to come before you and speak about our concerns. I would like you to know that I'm not the type of person who only brings concerns forward but solutions. And the solution is quite simple. We are asking for barriers to be installed for the safety of our operators and the public. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Brendan. I understand that you have a joint health and safety team who are working on this.
Well, we have a joint health and safety committee, yes, but there's no knowledge of the barriers that are going to be installed at any point.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The next registered delegation is Jennifer Voss. Welcome, Jennifer.
Oops. Good evening, Chair and members of Council. I'm here tonight with my husband, Peter Voss. We're residents in Cambridge on 187 West River Road. And we recently learned that a bus stop is proposed to be located in front of our residence on West River Road. And it's part of the new route redesign for Route 55 St. Andrews, which is being renamed 55 Grand Ridge. This matter was considered at a Planning and Public Works Committee on May 28th, I believe. And I'm sorry that we're late to the party on this one, but I just found out that the bus stop is being located or is proposed to be located in the front yard of our home. We found out recently through a neighbor who attended one of the public consultation meetings. And I had confirmed this through discussions with the transit planner from the Grand River Transit on Monday when I spoke to him. He confirmed that they're proposing to construct a 3-meter by 3-meter concrete landing pad in the front of our property. Oh, shoot. Pardon me? Sorry? Can you?
There appear to be gremlins in the system.
Okay. Oh, okay. So can I scroll down then? Okay, so this is the proposed bus stop location. Again, it's in the front of our house.
Our house, we have many concerns with respect to the location of this proposed transit pad. One of which is we had no idea it was part of the route improvements on West River Road. They're proposing a two-way loop along West River Road. And on West River, there are no sidewalks on our side of the street, on the east side of West River Road. So therefore, they're proposing just to plunk down this concrete slab at this point in front of our house. Again, I talked to the transit planner on Monday, and he did say that, he did confirm that. And he also, but he failed to mention that the actual route was being approved by council tonight. So it seems like you have to ask the questions in order to get specific information. And I feel that the impact of the location of a bus stop in this location has a great impact on our property for many reasons. The first reason, if you hadn't gleaned from the pictures, is that it's a heritage house. It was constructed in 1852 for farmer William Cowan, who owned a 30-acre farm established in 1829 on the banks of the Grand River. I'm not going to go in. I've provided some written correspondence from our legal counsel. It's in your agenda package, so I'm not going to go into the details of the heritage aspect of the property. It is listed as a property of interest on the City of Cambridge Heritage Register. And we have gone to great lengths since we purchased the house in 2007, painstakingly renovating it and restoring the house and enhancing the heritage attributes of this property. We have, last summer, we undertook a major landscaping project in the front of our house, including the replacement of the asphalt driveway and replacing it with heritage-style paving stones. We feel that the landscaping and the driveway materials that we selected, we purposely selected to enhance the heritage attributes of the house. Now, when I spoke to the transit planner, I asked him what evaluation criteria were used to recommend the location of this transit stop. And I referred to the provincial policy statement, which is issued under Section 3 of the Planning Act. And it requires all municipalities to be consistent with the policies of the PPS. And the PPS defines a built heritage resource as a built structure that is included on a local heritage register, which our house is. Similarly, I looked at the Region of Waterloo's official plan, and there are a number of policies and objectives with the protection and conservation of Cambridge's heritage, cultural heritage. Similarly, the City of Cambridge official plan has many policies and provides a lot of direction with respect to the protection and enhancement of the city's cultural heritage resources. Specifically, there's a policy that it says, council may assess the probable impact of proposed road improvements and other public works projects on any abutting cultural heritage resource, which is included in the Register of Cultural Heritage Resources. So in terms of deciding where to place these bus stops, it appears that there was no consideration for the city's official plan policies, the regional official plan policies, or the PPS. Also, in the City of Cambridge official plan, there's a chapter on urban design considerations. And specifically, it says that the City of Cambridge is committed to a high standard of urban design. It goes on to say that all development within the city is expected to demonstrate a high standard of urban design that supports the creation of unique identifiable space while respecting and enhancing our cultural and natural heritage. I don't think that the location of a concrete pad in the front of a heritage house is good urban design. And I don't think it conforms to the policies in the City of Cambridge official plan. There would appear to be no consideration of the impact of locating a bus stop in front of a prominent property which has high visibility and actually terminates in a view. So if you go down Cullum Street, that is the terminus of that intersection is our house. The other issue that concerns me is the preservation of the large sycamore tree that is located on the subject property. It was planted in the early 1900s, and so it's approximately 119 years old. And again, the regional and city's official plans speak to policies in terms of protecting trees, and especially protecting significant trees of heritage value. And if you look at this picture, the tree is quite old, and it is quite large, and it is quite significant. Recently, about 3-4 years ago, when they reconstructed West River Road, they had tree protection fencing around the tree, but the construction workers, for some reason, removed the tree protection fencing and were digging under the tree. So the tree has been struggling in the last couple of years. So I worry about the location of a concrete pad underneath the tree and the drip line of the tree. I worry about the impact of the installation of the concrete pad on the tree, and I also worry about winter maintenance of the concrete pad. On your agenda tonight, there's a report on winter maintenance of Grand River Transit bus stops. They pre-salt, sand, pickling, or full clearing of maintenance for a slip-free surface no later than 48 hours after a winter event. So I worry about the protection of that tree. In terms of accessibility, again, there are no sidewalks on the east side of West River Road. And this was determined through a municipal class environmental assessment when they reconstructed West River Road. And as part of that environmental assessment, it was determined through a thorough investigation of various alternatives that the impact of the construction of sidewalks on the east side of the street was unacceptable, and that the character of the neighborhood did not warrant sidewalks on both sides of the street. So therefore, there's no sidewalks. The road was recently reconstructed with sidewalks on the west side of the street only.
Jennifer, I'm sorry to interrupt you. I've been a little bit generous because of the glitch. If you could just conclude, that would be great. You're over your time.
Okay, so I would ask that council read the correspondence that we provided to you. Again, I know it's last minute, but I just found out yesterday that this was being considered tonight. When I spoke to the regional transit planner, he did say that the route was approved. So I was a little bit surprised when I went and I looked on the council agenda that it's actually being considered tonight. So in summary, we've invested a significant amount of money to improve our property, enhance the heritage characteristics of what is considered a landmark property in the city of Cambridge and in the West Galt neighborhood. We are concerned that the construction of the proposed bus stop will have an adverse effect on our property. So I am respectfully requesting that council defer the decision on the proposed route changes and service level improvements to the route referred to as 55 Grand Ridge until a thorough, transparent assessment is undertaken on the impacts of the location of new bus stops and the impact of the two-way loop on the neighborhood is evaluated. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. We have gremlins in our system, so council colleagues, I'm sorry if you've pressed your button. I'm unable to release you. However, I'm going to ask Mr. Schmidt if he can reference the report and the process that was followed to which you're referring to for this change bus route.
So there was quite a public process followed in getting to that route. I think probably in this case, staff have discussed with you some of the options on the pad. I think we can install the pad without impacting the tree. We could probably have further discussions. I don't have the information on exactly what other alternatives we've looked at for pads in that location. We could look at possibly alternative pad locations there. And what I would suggest is that we approve the route. Approving the route does not necessarily approve the location of these pads, and that we have further discussion with the residents on the pad location.
Thank you for that clarification, Jennifer. I hope that gives you some comfort that this isn't a done deal. I'm going to try to go to Councillor Foxton to see if she can turn her microphone on, and I know Councillor Kiefer does as well. And McGarry. Yeah.
Carl's got the extra mic right now.
Oh, Carl's got a mic, so he's going first. But Sue, you're on the list. Catherine, you're next.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Jennifer and Peter, for coming tonight and for your well-presented facts here. You did a lot of homework and you did well. As I spoke to you earlier, you are in agreement with sitting down with staff and possibly looking at relocating a bus shelter here. Is that right?
Yes, the landing pad and the bus stop, yeah, it just does not make sense putting it in the front yard of someone's home property. Right. It just doesn't make sense.
I think we can, as the commissioner has pointed out, I think we can maybe look at that and possibly come up with a different solution. So thanks for coming.
Thank you.
This is being live streamed, and they're going to miss your pearls of wisdom, Councillor Foxton.
Thank you, through the chair. I know this area really well. It was actually where I grew up. Okay, and she's absolutely right. But there is J and B Variety just down the street, a few blocks, which may have the space you require for this pad. There's also the church, right?
They're proposing a bus stop there as well.
Yeah. So do you need the two, or could you just do one at those areas? They're only a few blocks apart, because I actually used to walk this area, and that may work better. And it also hits the more dense areas, because as you can see, you're hitting the estate homes here, but if you look at 3rd, 4th, and 5th Ave and Column, they're more dense populations that may want more access to it. So I would recommend I'd look at a J and B Variety. That's just a suggestion. Thank you.
Councillor Foxton, you've obviously had a big impact, Jennifer, and we'll now go to Councillor McGarry.
Thank you.
It's a very cool tree, by the way.
Thank you very much, and you always learn a lot about council members here. I also live down the street from you when I first moved to Cambridge and didn't know that Mayor Foxton had, so I know your property incredibly well. I think what concerns me about this is not the fact we're trying to increase public transit and the ability for people to ride it. What worries me is the tree. It is a very old tree. It is an unusual one for the area. And I would also have the same concerns regarding a concrete pad that's put right there. So I would certainly recommend that we can look at potentially another spot for a pad. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Jennifer. We're going to take a short break while we reboot our system. Thank you for coming.
Okay, thank
and we'll just take a pause while we get our computers back up.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, everyone, for indulging our computer system. I'd now like to welcome Chief Stephen Van Valkenburg, Community Paramedic Program Update. I understand you got pushed off of a crowded agenda last week, so thank you for coming back, and we're very anxious to hear what you have to say.
Good evening, and through the chair, thank you. Happy to present this report. So just before I get started with the report, I just wanted to introduce Deputy Chief Jim Topham and Karen Toski, an operations supervisor. She's also the community paramedic lead for this program, and her skills have been invaluable in getting this program up and running and continuing to monitor as we go forward. So thank you very much for both Jim and Karen for this. So you were given a report last week. I'm just going to do a quick presentation here, highlighting some of the points of the report and the statistics. So in 2018, the Waterloo-Wellington Local Health Integrated Network, the LHIN, provided $246,000 in base funding for community paramedicine program in Waterloo region. In response to service demand challenges in an aging population, this non-emergency service aims to increase a patient's access to health and community programs while redirecting them away from emergency departments, hospitals, and 911, and that was also identified in the Paramedic Services Master Plan. The community paramedicine program has been providing outreach services since October 1st, 2018. Funding covers community paramedics working a total of 12 hours a day, Monday to Friday, as well as program oversight by a supervisor. Services include referrals to appropriate agencies, home visits, remote patient monitoring, and collaboration with healthcare partners. The report contains a number of key performance indicators and required LHIN reporting statistics, which are included in the appendices which were attached to the report, as well as some of the system efficiencies we've experienced to date in both the paramedic services and across the healthcare continuum. So on the slide there, you'll see in the goals and objectives, the aim of the community paramedic program is to provide appropriate support to the target patient populations identified through research and referral. And I'm not going to go through all of Appendix A, and it is in the report, but really it oversees the objectives of the community paramedicine program, goals of the community paramedicine programs, and services provided by the community paramedic. In order to be effective and fiscally responsible, the community paramedicine program during consultation and planning tried to ensure there was no duplication of services within the program. To best support the broader healthcare system, it was important to build strong partnerships, collaborate, and share resources amongst the varied healthcare providers and community service organizations when serving the target populations. Up on the board now is the phase one, which were identified in our submission to the LHIN of what we were going to center on. And the community paramedic program was structured to identify and focus on the strategically identified population groups related in phase one, which were high users of the emergency department, high users of the 911 paramedic services, paramedic referrals, and 911 transports to the emergency department that leave against medical advice. This system-based approach partnered with responsive operations has allowed us to add programs as well and partnerships earlier than originally planned, which is phase two. And those those also included remote patient monitoring, which we've instituted, Telehome Care Plus, we've instituted, emergency shelter referrals, we've instituted, and IV support for long-term care facilities, which we're in discussion currently with. I'm now going to show you some of the metrics that we've gathered through the CP program as it's been up and running. What you're seeing there is the community paramedic program enrollment by source. You're seeing 911 high users at 33.1%, paramedic referrals 45.3%, emergency department referral at 12.5%, and other at 10.9%. That was for phase one. The demographics of the clients enrolled within the program, as you'll see on the right-hand side of that scale, that's the over 74 group, which is about 38% of the total clientele in the program, and 65 to 75 is 22.4%. And what's a bit of an anomaly that we sort of didn't expect was the 27.6 in the 40 to 64 category. And really the second highest group is that because of the incidence of mental health addictions or complex medical issues for that particular group. In the geography of people enrolled in the program, the cities is 95.2% and the townships is 4.8%. So 911 usage of before the program, enrollment period, and then during the program. Although the program is still in its infancy, we can start to see the impact of the program by this chart. It's showing a slight decrease in 911 calls pre and during enrollment, It's actually showing 11% decrease in 911 calls. And similar results were found in emergency department visits for this group, which was a 10% reduction in ED visits. We hope that this trend continues for the next report and will show a lesser dependency on ED visits by enrolled clientele. Patient type captured here actually are very complex patients, complex issues, and they're very resistant to treatment. Many of these patients are vulnerable and complex with high incidence of mental health conditions, making behavior difficult to change. Early results show that patients enrolled in the community paramedic program are using 911 and emergency departments less often. For those that continue to use these acute care services, this finding suggests that they present with less severe injuries or medical issues than before involvement in the program. Ultimately, the goal is to have these individuals less reliant on 911 in the emergency rooms. However, this positive trending could also lead to fewer hospital admissions and with shorter stays. 911 call diversions, where the community paramedic gave other strategies to the patients in place of calling 911, were tracked for this group. In this reporting period, there were 56 diversions, a reallocation of approximately 72 paramedic service hours. These diversions will likely result in 38 avoided emergency department visits, which further reduce pressure in the system. Remote patient monitoring. So this is one of the phase 2s that we introduced early. Although remote patient monitoring was not scheduled to be implemented until phase 2, we made a decision that we had capacity to enroll patients in phase 1. We've had great success in enrolling patients into the program. Although the intake process is rigorous and time-consuming, once you have them set up in the program, it's more efficient to monitor their progress through this methodology. We're also funded with a small stipend for enrolling patients and monitoring their progress, helping to offset costs in the program. But I must note here, this is not a self-sustaining funding model. The LHIN's providing funding to sustain this program into the fall currently, with a goal of rolling 50 patients on a 50-patient rolling roster. Most of the referrals to the remote patient monitoring came from the rapid response nurse involved with hospital discharges and the partnership with Telehome Care Plus. The demographics of the remote patient monitoring, everyone that's enrolled is over 74 years of age. And that's normally because these patients are on chronic diseases. They're congestive heart failure, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, and diabetes. The geography, they're all within the urban or the city areas as well. And it is a balance between the KW4 and Cambridge North Dumfries areas. Remote patient 911 usage. There's 22 patients enrolled, 22 patients enrolled. There was a 19% reduction in 911 calls for this group and a 13% reduction in ED visits for this particular group. The community paramedic program, so this is just a slide showing the referral problem types, and it's showing the top 5 are failing activities of daily living, mobility issues, falls, caregiver support or burnout, and medical case management. As part of the community paramedic program, we have a satisfaction survey as well that we send to all the clients. And the patient caregiver satisfaction survey were sent to both active and discharged patients to get a baseline on a patient experience. All of the respondents would recommend this service to others, and 92% were satisfied with the service. And you can see some of the comments there. So in summary for the community paramedic program, we have positive results after the initial 6 months. The program is being well received by patients and system partners, experiencing reductions in 911 use and ED visits. And just as a side note, we went to the Community Paramedic Secretariat in the province, and we were recognized as a leadership award in conjunction with Guelph Wellington Paramedic Services for cooperation and work we did with the LHIN in order to set up our program. So we're quite proud of that, and thanks to Karen. And that's it. If there's questions?
That's a great note to end on. Congratulations. I have Michael Harris.
Thanks, Chief, for your presentation. Les Armstrong, or Mayor Councillor Armstrong and I attended the convocation of the 33 new paramedics on Friday night, and I just want to congratulate you and your staff, obviously, for picking a great crop of 33 new paramedics that were all of high caliber, and we're excited to hit the field. I know some of them, after graduating on Friday or receiving their stripes, were on a shift on Sunday, so we wish them well, and it's a big field of new candidates, but all the best to you and your team, and congratulations again on that. It was an excellent evening, so thank you.
Great. Through the chair, thank you, Councillor.
Councillor McGarry.
Thank you very much. And as one who spent really a full career in the healthcare system, I know how valuable this program is. I went out to a couple of stations while I was serving in the province of Ontario to see how the programs worked. I would say that having been a care coordinator for the LHIN and a critical care nurse, how valuable this program is. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And when there's trusted healthcare providers that are out there in the field that can identify problems early on and look after them, it's a huge savings in the long run, not only for our healthcare system, but indeed for the family. The outcomes are incredible, and it also means that there's an extra healthcare provider that can link up with services in order to keep people more safely in their homes. So thank you, and I commend everyone in the program for a job well done. Thank you.
Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Chief. I always like to attend those ceremonies because we're getting great new people and they need our support, and I think it's important that we're there. 6 months is probably a little early to be able to tell, but do you know if this has had any impact on the code reds?
So we really haven't studied the code red issue with regards to this because it has been 6 months. It's certainly, we have a ton of metrics that we're actually measuring in the background that aren't being presented here. And we're trying to wade through those metrics just to see what the full impact on the system is and what the costs are. So hopefully another 6 months and I'll be able to answer that question for you.
I see no other speakers. Chief, thank you. Congratulations on your recognition. Congratulations to you for your leadership and your entire team. And on behalf of everybody in Waterloo Region, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, Council, I would turn our attention to the minutes of previous meetings. We have a list from A to F. Council meeting from May 8th, closed council May 8th, closed committee May 28th, planning and works, finance and admin and community services. I would entertain a motion to accept those. Moved by Councillor Verbanovich, seconded by Councillor Erb. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? That is carried. Your communications you all received electronically. Does anyone have any questions or highlights they'd like to make at this point? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to go into committee of the whole to consider reports. Moved by Councillor Armstrong, seconded by Councillor Foxton. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? That is carried. There are some 6 motions that are listed as finance reports, and they're all on tenders. So that would be motion B, C, and recommendations on page 13, and one on page 21. Okay, moved by Councillor Strickland, seconded by Councillor Rentz. Does anyone have any questions about any of them? Okay. Councillor Michael Harris.
Yeah. Are we dealing with the one on page 27, the University of? So I have a couple questions pertaining to that particular project.
Okay, would you like to ask them now?
Yeah, I noticed that we only received 2 bids for this particular project, that it actually came in over budget initially. And I'm trying to open up the report, but I'm just wondering who I should direct my question to, perhaps Craig, on the fact, I guess, I know there's a provision or a side arrangement, if there was under three bids received, that there would be an option to go back out to a broader pool of bidders if that was exercised. Pardon me? Thanks.
Mr. Dyer, would you like to answer that?
Through you, Madam Chair. I can't say for certain, but I believe that that option wasn't exercised, and that was basically in relation to the timing of the project and the need for this work to be completed expeditiously. And so as indicated in the report, the approach then was to cancel the tender and to negotiate with the lowest bidder.
And how much initially was the project over budget on the first round of tenders? I don't think that was listed in here.
Mr. Dyer?
Yeah, so through you, Madam Chair, I can't say for certain, but I can certainly find out that information and get it back to you.
All right. That's
Do you have any further questions, Mr. Harris? Councillor Galloway?
Yes, Madam Chair, on the same matter, I'm disappointed that the bus shelters can't be installed, the ones that are, and we're going to use some secondhand ones. And I'm wondering, and maybe this is information you don't have, Mr. Dyer, but what was the additional cost for the bus shelters that were specified? Because it seems like we had $3 million in the budget for this project, and we're spending 2.8 something. Now that's not including the money from Metrolinx. So I don't know if I should be adding that into our cost or not. It seems like the $3 million was in our budget and did not include Metrolinx funding. So I guess the bottom line is I'm kind of curious as to what it would have cost if we were to put in the shelters that we had specified, and whether or not we can still do that and find some source of funding for it, as opposed to just relocating used shelters to a brand new facility.
Mr. Dyer, are you able to respond?
I can certainly give it a try. On page, looks like on page 29 of the report, there's a reference that an additional project is intended to be added into the draft Transit Services Capital Program in 2020 at approximately $3 million for the station's shelter canopies. So that may partially answer your question.
$3 million is for the canopies?
For the canopies, yes, that's correct.
Okay, I misread that, sorry. That's significant.
Okay.
Okay.
That answer your question,
Yes.
Councillor Galloway? Councillor Verbanovich?
Thank you very much. I just have a question with respect to winter maintenance at the Grand River Transit bus stops. And I know this was an area that we had some difficulty with last year. And I'm just wondering what due diligence we've done with this provider to ensure we don't have similar problems. It's the same provider again?
Mr. Murray, would you like to respond? Thomas? Thomas, you've been voted to respond.
I do not believe this is the same provider as last year. We have obviously gone through a process to vet these providers, and I mean, our hope is this year that we will not have the type of issues we've had in the past with winter maintenance. So I think we've done everything we can on our side to verify that they're able to do this work and can meet the service standards that we have.
And can you remind me, what is our service standard for transit stops? Because that, if I recall, seemed to be part of the problem as well. I seem to think that we're using 48 hours as the service standard, and kind of seems that maybe that's something that we need to actually improve on.
The service standard is actually stated on page 23, which is as soon as possible, no later than 48 hours after a winter event.
Okay, and does that meet the needs of our customer base? Because, I mean, it was an area that we heard some concerns about in the past.
I think the problem in any of these is the number of stops we have and our ability to try and get them all done in a shorter period than that. So we are obviously trying to get them done as quickly as we can, but it is very, very difficult with the number of stops that we have.
Okay, I guess we'll see what happens this year, but I think it's something we're going to need to continue to monitor and make changes if necessary.
Thank you. Councillor Rentz.
So this provider did the Waterloo, Woolwich, and Wilmot Townships contract for last year. So it's not like this is a new provider. This is someone that has some experience. Is this provider still going to do that, plus now the Kitchener stops?
Mr. Schmidt?
I believe yes, he will be, and yes, they were successful last year, and they actually helped us out in Kitchener last year.
So when you said that it was not the same provider, it certainly is. Okay, so I guess it never seems to be what we think it's going to be. And I get the winter conditions. I mean, when we get freezing rain and then snow, it's very hard to do that. But I'm just wondering if our service standards are unrealistic. We never seem to be able to hit the mark on them. And what kind of guarantees or what kind of discussions have we had with this provider to understand that he'll have the resources, they have the knowledge, they have the locations, and they're able to do the work within our service standards?
Mr. Schmidt?
Those are exactly the discussions that we've had with them to verify that they have been successful in the past. They have shown us that they're going to provide the resources to do the work. And based on the information we have right now, they will be able to meet our service standards.
Who does the Cambridge stops in?
Mr. Schmidt? Oh.
I'd have to get back to you on that. Okay. I don't have that.
And have we had any complaints down there? I mean, I guess I see what's happened in Kitchener, and I get the complaints, and I don't know. It seems to me that we usually have one provider that does it all, but I guess we have to job it out because it's complex, or the resources aren't there, or I understand. I mean, even the report, it talks about due to the nature of this work, it's not many people, not many vendors are even prepared to bid on it. But when we're paying that kind of money, we want to make sure that we're getting good value for it, right?
Mr. Schmidt, do you want to respond?
I agree. We
Not
want to
really.
get value. I think we would like to be able to have the stops cleared as quickly as possible. The reality is there are just so many stops. If you simply do a calculation of 15 or 20 minutes per stop, the number of people that you would need is extremely high. So based on the information we have, we believe they can meet the standards that we have set in this contract. And yes, it is parceled out into different groups and sections by municipality, largely so that we can get bidders that are able to provide the service in those areas without it getting too large.
And I don't mean to belabor the point, but this becomes an issue when the situation is quite bad. But I know that in the city of Kitchener, they've had many discussions about the municipality plowing sidewalks. And have we had any discussions with the lower till municipalities about partnering with them to, I mean, if we have somebody plowing sidewalks, they could do bus stops at the same time. Have we ever talked about pooling our resources and our funds to look at some way of doing that in a more efficient manner, or?
I would have to check with staff to be sure on that.
I'm sorry?
Service review. It's for the people. It's for the people.
It just
Councillor Rentz,
makes sense.
We used to do the summer, but the region took it away.
The region? You're the region, buddy.
Jeez. We didn't want to do it.
So Councillor Rentz, have your concerns at this point been addressed sufficiently? I'm not saying you got the answers you wanted, but you did get
I
answers,
think that's
right?
something that we need to talk about, because the bottom line is, people are looking for good service and good value, and I think when we partner up, we usually try to provide that, so.
Thank you. Councillor Harris.
I'm going to let Councillor Foxton go ahead of me because it's on this matter. I'll defer after, if you don't mind.
Councillor Foxton.
Thank you, and through the chair, I like how you've done some of this, Mr. Schmidt. I like that it's a 1 year to reevaluate. There's a lot I like in it. I think sometimes we forget the immenseness of the stops. Like our township does do all our sidewalks, but we're a lot smaller than what you guys are. And even with that, and trying to get to every single one, it's complicated. People are, why aren't they doing my street first? Why aren't they doing my street first? And so there are issues, and this is a tough situation, especially we live in Canada. So, I mean, it was snowing in Quebec yesterday. Things are pretty bizarre in this side of the world. So I do like a lot that you've done. And you have to remember that when we have our sidewalks being done, they're done by landscaping companies that want to keep their staff on throughout the year, so they contract for this. The only thing I could recommend for such a density is that there's a lot of landscaping companies, small ones around Kitchener, that may want to do neighborhood areas. That may help to alleviate that, but that's the only thing that I could think that would work.
So, Councillor Harris, is your question on any of the recommendations before us or the next one coming up?
Yep. Page 20, the report.
You have to push your button.
So yes, on page 20, the report 19-63 project budget variations, I believe that is a matter before us. I'm just wondering, I noticed that a couple of those projects requiring additional funding, Trustler Road and Maple Grove Road, significant increases, I think, if I'm not mistaken. Just curious as to what perhaps is the reasoning on those. In one case, it was almost double. Am I reading that right?
So, Mr. Schmidt, is this one yours too?
It probably is, and I'll have to go back and pull
That's
the
fine.
specific reports for those to get that information.
Okay.
So I see no more speakers. Are we ready for the vote? It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? That is carried. The next item is an audit and accountability fund report. Councillor Strickland.
Yes, Madam Chair, I'd be pleased to move that recommendation and then speak to it when appropriate.
Okay, Mr. Murray wanted to make some opening comments. Shall we move it and put it on the floor, and then I will come back to you?
Sure, yeah.
And Councillor Harris is going to second it. Mr. Murray?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to make a couple of brief comments. This is a late starter report because this is a late starter initiative by the provincial government. So we got information last week about the rollout of this program. They've got fairly tight timelines. They've asked for municipalities to indicate their intent, whether we intend to submit an application for funding. Frankly, staff have already done that. We've told them that we intend to. And then applications are due by the end of June. So pretty tight timelines. If you've had a look at the report, what the province has done is provide a bit of flexibility about how this money can be used. It can be used for line-by-line budget reviews. It can be used for other studies that try to get at improving efficiency, effectiveness, review of administrative process to reduce costs. So they've given a bit of flexibility to municipalities and funding essentially to help us find ways to be more efficient, be more effective, and reduce costs. So staff have given some thought to this. We talk in the report about work that the region has done in the past, the KPMG service review, our annual base budget reviews, previous program reviews. And essentially our recommendation is that we look for areas to frankly do deep dives. The service review, if you recall, councillors who were involved, was a broad look at right across the organization, but it didn't go very deep. And what we're suggesting is that really in order to find some significant savings, we need to look at a couple of program areas, do a deep dive, and really see if we can find some efficiencies. We've adopted or embraced as a performance improvement tool Lean Six Sigma. Some of you will be familiar with that. We've got Lean Six Sigma Black Belt on staff. And that may be the methodology that we use with the funding from the province. So happy to answer any questions.
Councillor Strickland, did you want to make some comments?
I understand that Councillor Harris is going to move an amendment, so I'll let that get on the floor, and then I'll speak to the amendment and the main motion.
Okay. Councillor Harris, do you want to second it or make your amendment?
I did second it, but
Yeah, okay.
initially, I have a question quick, I guess, of Mike's presentation there. When you said I guess the funding criteria would be a third party, is it your expectation that in this staff recommendation that a third party would be retained to do this, or that would be internal forces?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, the funding that the province is making available is to engage third-party experts.
Mm-hmm. All right, well, now on to perhaps an amendment to the initial recommendation. In interest to save some time, you'll notice that on the consolidated agenda, I did have a notice of motion, but as mentioned by Mr. Murray, the timing is of the essence, and I think we can all appreciate, most recently the province's announcements that we're going to reduce some of our existing funding for budgeted items, and then there was a bit of a walk back, obviously, on that. Knowing that we are going to likely have to make some significant decisions during our next budget cycle, and if not heavier decisions the following budget cycle, we need to take advantage of any tool or any report available to council to properly make those decisions that will obviously fit the criteria and the mandate of the region, ensuring that we're delivering all of our services to our constituents and taxpayers in the most cost-effective, efficient way. I will say when I first took my seat, I did have an opportunity to read the KPMG report of 2015. There were, 5 areas that I feel was a pretty deep dive and made some specific recommendations on how to continue to deliver the service that people expect, but perhaps, in a more efficient, economical way. It was unfortunate perhaps that those recommendations weren't acted upon, but I definitely think perhaps most would say we are in a much different reality now with financial pressures, frankly, facing the region. And I think, unlike perhaps other folks at different levels of government to just arbitrarily, cut and expect us at the most direct tier of government to have to make a decision. We need factual information that'll help guide our decisions on some of these matters to ensure that services that people expect will still continue to be delivered, but in the most effective manner. And so I guess I'm suggesting an amendment that would strike a steering committee, which would be comprised of course, the audit committee and 2 additional members of council to formulate a scope of a review by a third party that would definitely include at least the revisiting of the KPMG report and those 5 areas identified. In fact, we could go broader, and I know there was about 75. It's a great starting point, knowing that we are under perhaps the gun on timing. And then as well, we could include as a second measure the staff recommendation that we've heard here in this report to come back to council for final approval. I believe on prior to the deadline that we would need to submit. And so I can read something, but I would like to make an amendment that would again strike a steering committee comprised of the audit and 2 additional members of council working with senior staff to look at the option that staff has presented tonight, the second one that I've looked at, and any other options in terms of a scope for a value for money audit that will help guide council's decisions in this upcoming budget process, ensuring that they meet our values, you know, and it's programs that we're delivering already, and ensuring that we get good value for the tax dollars people spend. So I'll kind of summarize that, and perhaps I'll chime back in, and I'll leave it at that.
So in essence, you're amending this motion, and then your intention is to withdraw your notice of motion? Pending the outcome.
There's no.
Councillor Strickland, do you want to comment?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I support the friendly amendment, and I'll speak to the amendment and to the main motion. With respect to the amendment, I think it's important that we have council involved in this process through a steering committee, and that essentially help guide the process in terms of the various options that are out there with respect to hiring and going through a third-party review. So hiring the third-party reviewer and also determining what the scope of that person and that group would be. And I've had a good conversation with Mr. Dyer on this matter, and staff are prepared to work with the steering committee to help stick handle this through. I chaired the committee in 2014-15 with KPMG, so there might be an option due to the quickness of time through our procurement bylaw. We might be able to rehire them on a quick basis. But I think it's important that we have to move quickly, and that the amendment is really calling for a steering committee of council to help guide the process. That's essentially what the amendment's calling for, and I support that. Then in terms of the main motion, I think staff have, there's an opportunity there, and I have to credit staff because, they recognize we have some severe financial challenges going into the 2020 budget, and if we can get some help from a third party and we get the province to fund it, well, at least we can get that revenue source, which might be a small victory based on the approximate $10 million shortfall we're going to have for budget for next year. So I think I'd like to compliment staff on that, and I think both go hand in hand. Let's indicate our intentions to the province, and then let's form a steering committee to help guide that process and further flesh it out.
Mr. Murray, do you want to make a comment on the timing?
Well, I think I commented earlier on the timing, so it's, pretty tight timing. So I would say any councillors who are, volunteering to be on the steering committee, I would just encourage you to make yourselves available because, we'll probably need to fit in a couple of meetings between now and council meeting in late June.
Councillor Harris?
The only other item I think I missed here is that we know recently there was provincial discussion on or reductions specifically in public health, childcare, and paramedic services, and I thought that would be incorporated perhaps into option 2, be it that staff's would be option 1.
Okay.
Potentially for the steering committee to look at.
Contemplate. I thought maybe you were volunteering, Councillor Harris.
I am volunteering, actually. Be happy to be a part of that if.
Councillor Jaworski.
I was just going to say that since this is a council meeting and time is of the essence, we probably have to identify those 2 volunteers right now as well. Pencil them in the motion.
So Councillor Harris has volunteered. Are you volunteering, Councillor Jaworski? Do we have another volunteer? So I'm assuming that the audit committee is the chairs of our standing committees, the vice chair of finance and admin. So we have one volunteer. Do we have another volunteer? Okay, we'll take that offline then. Councillor Foxton.
Is any of my mayor counterparts being willing to step up so that we have a township representative? I guess I might be stepping up. So I think the township should be represented. I think we should have a township representative.
I think in essence, the other 3 township representatives stepped back, and therefore you've stepped up. Thank you.
We can pair that.
Thanks, guys.
Okay, so do we need the amended motion read, or do we all think we have in essence, know what it is? Everybody's good? Okay. All those in... Okay. I'm assuming we are going to treat this amendment is a friendly amendment, as Councillor Strickland said, so we are now dealing with the amended motion. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? Oh, Councillor Galloway, your light's not on. Did you want to speak?
Well, we just voted, didn't we?
We did, but do you have a question?
No, I didn't have a question. No, that's fine.
Okay. Sorry, there was no light. Okay, so we are now moving on to committee reports, Planning and Public Works, page 31, and Closed Planning and Public Works, page 32. Councillor Galloway.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll move the 8 recommendations from the Planning Works Committee and add from the closed session of last Tuesday a land acquisition matter, or settlement agreement rather, with the Coronation Medical Plaza, Coronation Boulevard, and Cambridge.
Thank you, Councillor Galloway. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Foxton. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? That is carried. We have Finance and Administration report. Councillor Strickland.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to move the 3 recommendations from Admin and Finance, 1 dealing with input onto Bill 108, 2 dealing with periodic financial reports, having an additional 1 submitted to us at committee, and that we also approve the revised timeline for regional development charge background study so that the bylaw will be approved on June 26th.
Seconded by Councillor Jowett. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? That is carried. Community Services. I see that Councillor Clark had to absent herself. Councillor Rentz, would you like to move these? Seconded by Councillor Kiefer. All those in favor? That is carried. Mr. Burry, do you have any pithy comments you'd like to make at this time? We have another matter to consider under Committee of the Whole, and that's a Consumption and Treatment Services Interim Site Strategy. And I'm wondering, Mr. Murray, if you'd like to introduce it, or should we just go to...
I will just ask, I think Karen Quigley-Hobbs is going to provide a bit of an overview of where we're at and the report recommendations.
Okay.
Thank you.
Through you, Madam Chair, good evening, councillors. Before you this evening are recommendations to endorse the establishment of the interim consumption treatment service site, along with the associated funding and budget. The options for the interim site that were presented to you on April 30th were examined by staff and partners based on cost and the implications on the timeline for establishing the full service model at 150 Duke Street West. As a result, staff are recommending that an interim consumption and treatment service site be operated within the site at 150 Duke Street West, Kitchener. As the approved site for consumption and treatment services, an interim site at 150 Duke West would minimize disruption to clients and the general community that may occur during changing site location. There would also be no cost associated with trailer rental and renovation, nor the lease of a second property. The presence of an interim site will have some impact on the timeline for the construction of the full site at 150 Duke Street West. The impact is estimated to be at 1 to 2 months. You will also find timelines and costs outlined in the body of the report.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions? There is. Councillor Bravanovich.
Thank you very much. I'm certainly very pleased to see this report here, because I think we need to, especially in light of the stats, move forward with this sooner than later. I'm just wondering at the same time if we can get an update as to where we're at with the application process for the permanent site.
Yes, through you, Madam Chair. The application for the permanent site for the provincial funding has gone in. We as well have started the federal application for the permanent site as well, and pending approval this evening, we'll move forward with the application for federal approval for the interim site, they do look at a 14-day turnaround for that.
So one of the things that I understand from our participants from the City of Kitchener in the visit to the site visit to Calgary, there were a number of lessons learned, and one of them that I understand in speaking with our CAO, Mr. Chapman, who participated, was the need for 24-hour security. In fact, that was something that they did not have initially, and Calgary strongly recommended that we, in fact, should have that in place, from my understanding from Mr. Chapman. And so I'm wondering, is that something we're going to be doing as part of the temporary site? Because I think it's going to be important that we set the right tone from the beginning in terms of managing any potential challenges and difficulties.
There will be a policing and security plan devised for both the interim site and then as well that will be enhanced for the permanent site.
So does, I'll just being specific though, does the budget contemplate 24-hour security? Because I know that is something that came out of one of the recommendations that when Mr. Chapman briefed me post the visit, that was one of the things that came up. The second one that came up, and I'll ask, might as well ask it now so that when you answer, you can also touch on that, is when we start looking at the permanent site, there was, I guess, the experience in Calgary involved people who not only were injecting, but were also, I guess, consuming through smoking or whatever, and while that isn't something that we've been contemplating, they found that has certainly helped in terms of dealing with their particular circumstances in terms of overdoses.
So I see Dr. Wang wants to reply.
Yes, thank you for the questions, Mayor Urbanovic. So yes, I was on the Calgary tour with Dan and regional police officers. Regarding the security situation, as I understood it, there were a number of factors that led to, or potentially led to, some challenges, including much less police presence than they would have now. So I think, as Karen quickly mentioned, the security and the policing plan that we're developing right now with our partners will take into account what we heard in Calgary. So I'm not sure it's specifically the 24-hour security alone that is essential. I do think it needs to be a combination of both security and policing. In regards to the inhalation question, inhalation services, which do mandate specific building renovations and additional costs, are not covered by the provincial government for funding for a consumption and treatment services site in Ontario. They are covering other forms of injection, which do represent the more frequent and significant forms that are related to overdoses. So we will be moving ahead with what is funded. Hopefully that helps a little.
Okay, I think that's something we'd like to have some more conversation around. Based on, again, I think the whole point of going on these missions is to actually get lessons learned from others, and this is some of the feedback that has come back. And as the host municipality, I'd like us to have some more dialogue around that. The security piece is something that is going to be a prime concern for us for many of the reasons we've talked about. And while we continue to be supportive, I'm hoping that that's something that's going to be taken seriously as part of the implementation plan.
Excuse me, Councillor Lawrence.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think Councillor Urbanovic raises a good point, but what kind of security did they use there? Did they have off-duty police, or they just had a a security service, which I'm still not done.
Councillor Pecuniary.
Thank you. Yeah, Madam Chair, my understanding was it was a security service, and the intent was to, when people were coming after hours, dealing with those individuals, giving them information, moving them on, so they're not hanging around on the property and so on. And sort of, they, from what I understand, they didn't do that early on. That added to some of the problems that they were having, and so that was part of their recommendation for us to look at that from day one.
Well, I know that we have Barbara Collins here, and Transit uses it as well, and they have a number of mobile units, so that may be something where we can, if we have mobile units at night dealing with transit issues, and there's an issue over there, I don't see why they couldn't work out something like that without having to hire another firm or have off-duty. I'm just curious about the, I'm not so worried about the federal, but I'm worried more, I guess, or more concerned about the provincial application. Have we had any indication from provincial staff that there's not going to be an issue?
I don't know if they would be prepared to say that without completely going through the application. We do know that there are still 5, maybe 6 more spots available that they have confirmed, and that we have worked closely with them in terms of meeting the requirements and the criteria for funding application. But in advance of them taking the time to go through it, I don't believe that they would make a statement like that.
So when we receive a go-ahead from the province, is that the trigger where we start doing things, or are we talking about looking at the temporary location right now?
The temporary location we would move forward with now because it's based on local funding. The permanent site, we're hoping to have response from the province as efficiently and as soon as we possibly can.
Are we in possession of that building now? No?
Mr. Murray, do you want to? No, not yet.
Okay, so we need to be renting it before we could do anything to it. Yeah. So when we're there, I'd like to be able, I can't see it in my mind how we would set that up, and I would like to have the opportunity to see inside and understand how it's all going to work.
Okay.
And maybe that would be something that we could open the invitation to all members of council.
So a tour.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Strickland.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think the discussion around security is an important one, and I'm sure staff will look into that, make sure we have the appropriate security at the site. But I don't want to lose sight of the fact that this is a very important step for our community to have this interim safe consumption site. We've been discussing this issue for a number of years. The problem continues to get worse, not better. And here we are, the region of Waterloo, stepping up and providing a service to look after our citizens in the absence of federal and provincial funds for something which I think is a national pandemic. And so kudos to us for doing what we feel is in the best interest of our community. And I don't want to lose sight of the fact of how important this step is for us here tonight.
Thank you, Councillor Strickland. Would you like to move the recommendation?
I would be pleased to. Yeah,
Okay,
I'll move the
seconded by Councillor Rentz. Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed, if any? That is carried. I now entertain a motion for the Committee of the Whole to rise and Council to resume. Moved by Councillor Kiefer, seconded by Councillor McGarry. All those in favor? That is carried. Councillor Harris, I'm assuming, given the result of your friendly amendment, you are withdrawing your notice of motion?
Correct.
Thank you. I would entertain a motion to adopt proceedings of the Committee of the Whole, moved by Councillor Nowak, seconded by Councillor Shantz. All those in favor? That is carried. Is there any unfinished business? Seeing none. Any questions? I would entertain a motion of the bylaws first Tom's got, Councillor Galloway.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I have a question, and I did raise it with Mr. Regier earlier today, so I'm sure he has a very fulsome response. I was concerned when I read in the record last week about this a study that the City of Kitchener and the Region of Waterloo is undertaking for the museum. And that, because I was, first of all, I was unaware that it was occurring, but as I was subsequently told, it did seem appropriate that it was at the staff level, so I don't have any question about that. But how it was portrayed in the newspaper caused me some angst, because it seems like there are some people in the community that think this is almost like a feasibility study for a new facility. And I don't think at this point in time we are in that particular mode. My understanding is that the scope of this project is not that at all. But if you were to read the article, we're going to be considering the Charles Street Terminal as a location, and we're going to consider demolition of the existing Gaudi's building and so on. And I think that goes way beyond at least what I would expect this study to contain, because if it did include those kind of parameters, I can't imagine that it would have occurred without council's clear direction. So what I'm worried about is that there will be people in the community, possibly in the arts community, who may have a misconception now of what is actually taking place. So I would like Mr. Regier to clearly enunciate what, in fact, this study is about. I believe it's being 50-50 funded from the city and the region. And it sounds like that's a very good project. I don't have any question about that, but I just think we need some clarity, publicly at least, on what this study is about.
Mr. Regier?
Yeah, thank you. Through you, Chair Redmond. Yeah, certainly the three partners in this project are the museum itself, which, although they are not contributing funds to the consulting costs, are definitely participating with in-kind, making an in-kind contribution and participating actively in the project, the City of Kitchener and the Region of Waterloo. The purpose of the study is to look at the organizational capacity of the museum as an organization, and to take a look at the potential market readiness for some sort of an expansion. It is not, and I can repeat that this is not a feasibility of study of any kind. We are not looking at a specific proposal. There has not been any discussion regarding the Charles Street Terminal. I was as surprised as anyone when that was mentioned in the article. Certainly, this piece of work is really looking at the organization of the museum itself and its ability to deal with a major proposal, as has been contemplated in the media, or has been talked about in the media by the museum.
Councillor Galloway, does that answer your question? Okay. Councillor Jaworski.
Thank you. Through the chair, we're going to be implementing LRT imminently, and I've noticed a lot of improvements on the gates, lights, and crossings, but there's still, I see some more work to do, and I'm wondering if maybe in our August meeting we get some more information back after the LRT's been running for 6 to 8 weeks, to get more information back on what improvements we still see making for the crossings, to make sure they're as snappy as possible for the traffic that needs to go by.
Excellent. We'll put that on the agenda for August. Councillor Erb.
A couple of weeks ago, Councillor Galloway represented the region at a calendar launch for a young gentleman who died in 2007, Lee J. Levine. There was a challenge put out for selling calendars. Councillor Galloway challenged me to bring calendars back here to sell to regional staff or councillors at $10 a throw. I have a bag under my desk.
Well done, Councillor Erb. I would just remind everybody in attendance who has signed up for Red Day for St. Mary's Hospital for Women's Catheterization Lab. That's happening this Friday. Donate early, donate often. It's a great cause. I signed up my entire family to be Team Redmond. Oh, and Sunnyside Walk and Roll is this Saturday. Who amongst us has not sponsored Douglas Bartholomew Saunders? Looks like you've got full participation, Douglas. That will be a great event. I will now entertain a motion to enact the bylaws first, second, and third readings. Who would like to move that? Councillor Armstrong, seconded by Councillor Jowett. All those in favor? That is carried. And now I would entertain a motion to adjourn. Councillor Foxton, Councillor Erb. All those in favor? Thank you.